Let me start with you, Minister Barrow. Difficult world, a world of opportunities, lots of developments happening all around. What are your perspectives on the India-France partnership as it exists today and for the future?
First, I'd like to thank Minister Jaishankar for his presence today. I'd like to thank you and the ORF for deciding to pick Marseille as the place for this new sort of format of the Raisina dialogue that have proven over the years as being a great initiative to stimulate conversations on cooperation and connectivity in many different continents and places around the world. And I see Renaud Muselier and Madame Rubirola here, who know more than anyone how Marseille is clearly a place that should be seen as a platform for connectivity in terms of energy, in terms of telecommunication, but also for logistics. It's the entry point to continental Europe. And that's why in a moment when both India and France, when Prime Minister Modi was here 3 months ago, are willing to reactivate the IMEC project, Marseille is probably second to Mumbai, the best place to discuss this, because there is clearly a willingness to move forward. And so I want to finally thank Rodolphe Saadé to host us here in Tangram. He and Tanya as well, who are promoters of this strong cooperation that we want to enhance with our Indian friends. In many dimensions, but in particular in the field of connectivity. So this meeting that brings us together this morning has never had so much meaning in terms of timing, I think, a few months after the Prime Minister's visit, and in terms of place, because this is the gateway to continental Europe.
Minister, I also want to quickly ask you a second question on the innovation aspect, because that's something also that Rodolphe mentioned in his speech, and yesterday it was used a few times, the innovation partnership and a new kind of a relationship emerging based on AI and emerging technologies. How is that panning out for you?
So I was mentioning IMEC, that is actually an initiative that started from the Indian presidency of the G20. But there is indeed, even though these two topics are not disconnected, an important field of current and future cooperation between France and India, which is innovation, digital, and AI. We've been co-chairing earlier this year a major summit, perhaps the largest ever organized on AI, that was hosted in Paris. The next edition of this global summit on AI will be held next year in India. And we've decided to organize a joint French-Indian Year of Innovation in 2026. And so in the run-up to this year of 2026, where India will host the Global Summit on AI, where we'll jointly organize the Year of Innovation, wherein India will be chairing the BRICS and France will be chairing the G7, we can make this agenda, which is both a bilateral agenda, but I think also a global agenda, move forward at a fast pace.
Dr. Jaishankar, G7 and BRICS. Which other G7 country would you sit in and discuss the potential of BRICS partnering with the G7? Is that what makes the France-India partnership special? That there is a realism to it and a recognition of how collaboration on the areas of convergence is important today?
Yes, I mean, you could also flip it the other way around. Which BRICS country would a G7 be sitting with and talking about? And I agree with you. I think in a way, what's different in our relationship, India and France, is we've always been guided, by a certain, I would say, sense of independence or ability and willingness to strategize for ourselves. This has been a primary hallmark of both our foreign policies. And what it does in this world, and we had a little bit of a discussion about this yesterday, in this world, I think those who come to terms with, this sort of volatility, uncertainty, what Mr. Sadeh spoke about, you will get the possibilities if you are realist about analyzing the landscape. If on the other hand you wring your hands and say everything is different, oh my God, what's happening, you're not going to have the mental strength really to see the opportunities. So we are in the midst of, frankly, I think many important relationships in the world are going to get refashioned in the coming months and years. And certainly those like us, which have a very strong, sound footing, will actually be able to build on it. Now, if, just take a look at this. We were discussing connectivity. Mm-hmm. And yet we are taking steps practically on shipping, which is a very crucial element of connectivity, to give shape to that connectivity cooperation. Similarly, again, there's a big debate about AI, guardrails of AI, what will be the principles. And sure, the debates will go on. But behind the debates, there should be a willingness to an ability to really come up with something cooperative, something practical, and that again is something, what you see between India and France. So what I find very impressive about our relationship is this ability to take worldviews and make it into practical propositions for cooperation. And then the practical propositions shape the worldview as a dynamic. And I think that's really what has distinguished us.
And one of the objectives of this panel was also to look at India, France, and Europe. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Jaishankar, and I'll turn to Minister Barrow after that, but Dr. Jaishankar, first to you. How is this bilateral that you share with France shaping the India-EU partnership? Is it?
It is. Again, from an Indian perspective, we historically have approached Europe more as nation states. There's nothing wrong with it. That's the way, after all, Europe was at some point of time. I think it took us a little while to fully understand the relative roles of the Brussels and its competence and the national competences and how the two interact with each other. So if you see the last decade, we have really engaged Brussels much more deeply than we did before. And that has actually helped, again, the various bilateral relationships. I mean, without the blessing and the encouragement of the individual members, Brussels would not be going forward with the FTA negotiations. Without the FTA negotiations going forward, we are not going to be able, say, India-France trade will stagnate unless we do something different. Mm-hmm. So this dynamic, I think, for us is very helpful. And, to some extent, of course, those member states who are very active in Brussels and very committed to increasing the EU-India cooperation, I think they make a big difference, and surely France is among them.
Mr. Barrow, the same question to you, but from a lens of France trying to have more Rodolphe Sadehs in Brussels and the rest of the EU who are action-oriented, who want to invest, who want to build opportunities, more people like yourself who actually are visualizing a future where the India-Europe relationship is beneficial.
I think there is no doubt in the world that we live in that a stronger relationship between the EU and India is valuable for everyone. But now, earlier I said that Marseille is the gateway to continental Europe. But indeed, for India, France is in some way a gateway to Europe. Why? Well, because as often, everything is shaped by geography and by history. And when you look at geography, France is a nation of the Indian Ocean, which has led us to develop specific cooperations to get to know each other because we have a common geography to handle. And then as far as history is concerned, we've been very strong partners for 7 decades. And so whether it's defense or economic cooperations or mobilities, all of what we've achieved together so far showcases the benefits of stronger and stronger links between the EU and all its member states and India. And that's why we supported the recent trip of the European Commission to India and the ongoing discussions leading to an FTA.
Dr. Jaishankar and Minister Barrow, I'm now going to ask you to wear your predictive hat. And I'm going to ask you to think about 3 relationships for the future and how are they likely to play out and how important is it to invest and follow these relationships. One, of course, is the state of the transatlantic relationship. It's an important one. And for those who are watching this conversation, it might be useful to have views from France and India on how the state of the transatlantic relationship and is it still going to fundamentally host the 21st century architecture. That's the first relationship. The second, of course, is the relationship we hear most about in recent times, which is the China-US relationship. And the third relationship, of course, is the EU-China relationship, the relationship of this geography with China. So to both of you, these 3 big relationships, since you've already spoken about the India relationship, I think let's turn our gaze to these. Mr. Barrow, let's start with you.
The US and European countries are allies, and they are allies in particular within the framework of NATO, the summit of which will convene in a few days. There will be an opportunity for new commitments for European countries to take a larger share of the responsibility within NATO, for the US to clarify their strategic focus, and in particular the way they apprehend one threat that is existential for European countries, which is the threat of Russia. In addition to that, European countries have a long and deeply rooted history with the US, and as we are currently negotiating the future of our trade agreements, we are at the same time offering many arguments to show how hurtful a trade war between the US and Europe may be, to the detriment of consumers on both sides of the Atlantic, but also reaffirming that we will defend our commercial and industrial interests if indeed the US trade administration persists in its willingness to apply high trade barriers. But in general, what President Macron has been saying for 8 years now, at the time, few European countries were convinced, but now they're all convinced, but it's time to move from words to actions and to walk the talk. Well, our aim is to reach strategic autonomy, which basically rests on the ability that we have to produce for ourselves, whether it's in defense or other strategic sectors, but also creating diversified relationships with the rest of the world in an open manner. As far as the relationship between the US and China is concerned, I think that Dr. Jaishankar here will agree with me that India and France and many other European countries have no intention to be dragged into tensions, into trade wars that we have not chosen. And President Macron, when he was in Southeast Asia a few days ago, he called for a coalition of independence, meaning a coalition of those that believe in the principles of open and regulated trade, in the principles of multilateralism, and that refuse the logics of coercion spheres or influence spheres, but want to stay faithful to the international order that has been built in a multilateral fashion and that has not avoided all conflicts and wars, but that has provided for prosperity, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, and that needs to be preserved. And as far as the relationship between the EU and China is concerned, we have a honest dialogue with China. We are open to some cooperations with China in the field of economy, in the field of global issues as well. China has been a supporter of the efforts, some of which were led by France 10 years ago, for instance, to reach the Paris Agreement, and they're still showing, or at least showing themselves very committed to the preservation of or the fight against climate change. But we also need China to understand that we remain committed to international trade that respects WTO principles and fair competition, and that we need for China to take into account our security interest, the most important of which is currently at stake in Ukraine. It's very difficult for us to have to open up to new cooperation as fruitful as they may be, while in the meantime seeing that China facilitates or supports the war effort of Russia against Ukraine, because everyone knows that, because Russia does not make secrets of its intention not to stop in Ukraine, but rather to dismantle the European Union that it sees as an existential threat for the future of Russia. So we need our security interests to be taken into account. We need to be able to discuss economic issues in a way that is compliant, respectful of fair competition, WTO principles, and then we can open up for fruitful cooperation.
Dr. Jaishankar.
Well, I'd comment on the first two. China, EU is not for me to say. But on the transatlantic relationship, you can put any words you want to, but the fact is, in June of 2025, it is significantly different from what it was in the June of 2024. Now, what does it mean for a country like India, or in fact for other parts of the world? I think what it means is that there is a much sharper awareness in Europe about Europe's interests, about Europe's capabilities, or the need to develop more capabilities. And along with that, a sharper sense of realism in dealing with the transatlantic alliance, but also with the world. In a sense, I would say those traits were already in Europe very strong in France. And often what we would, the kind of thinking we would encounter in Paris, in France, today I see much more of that in the rest of Europe. So there is a kind of a collective shift in Europe, and in France that was already there. Maybe it's become sharper. But it's much more evenly now felt and kind of expressed in Europe. So what for us it would mean is it gives, in a way, an even stronger reason to invest more time and energy and attention to developing the India-Europe relationship, precisely because it is strategically more autonomous. because it is now more self-aware, that it will now, think about global issues more from a European perspective rather than a larger collective. That is the case. Again, I don't want to exaggerate it. I mean, I don't want to say that, that West is no longer there. I think that kind of declinism is a very overstated analysis. But the change is real, and the change has policy implications for us, which is why, in a way, we are making all this effort. On US-China, again, there's no doubt that over a period of time, this is less of a sudden change, say, between 25 and 24. It's been happening, there's a greater degree of continuum, but the nature of the relationship has become significantly, some would even say, primarily competitive. And this is not an administration issue. It is beyond administrations. This was visible even in the previous administration in the US. It is also shared, say, by the Congress. It is shared by other sections of American polity and thinking. And by the way, in many ways articulated by China also. I mean, if you see how China views the United States and articulates it, it is also much more competitive terms than it was, say, 10 years ago. So it's moving in a certain direction. There's a greater consistency to it. And I think, again, realism doesn't mean cynicism, but it means you take the world as it is and make your plans accordingly. So we have to strategize, keeping in mind this sharp competitive element between US and China. Now, again, we go back to this, that in every difficulty, there is an opportunity. But every opportunity is also not easy, can be difficult.
But why have you not commented on the European-China relationship? That has consequences as well for India, right?
Well, I thought I would delicately leave it to him.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, fun question. We're going to turn to you now. So please get ready. I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions for the ministers. And I'm going to try to remember them. So we'll take them in a bunch and we'll come back to them. But a fun question. I've been seeing that you guys hang out in the same neighborhood. So look at the friends you have. When I say you, mean India and France. I don't mean you two. So it's not personal. We are still looking at sovereigns. But, for example, very strong relationships both of you share with the UAE and the Middle East countries. And, we're thinking of also sometimes collecting together as one. Armenia is another one. So, I can name a few more. The point is, do you coordinate on who are we going to be friends with, or is it happening by chance?
No, it's like this. If you have a certain view of yourself and of the world, then it is likely there will be overlaps.
So it's not coordinated.
No, it's intuitively it moves in that direction because you think in a very converging way. So it's very likely that that
you're bound to make similar.
You're bound to make once you have exactly that kind of mindset which I told you, you're bound to make some similar choices or have similar preferences, and there will be overlaps out of it.
Minister.
I fully agree with Dr. Jaishankar on this, on the analysis of where these overlaps come from. But clearly there is also, I think, an intent on both sides to try and make the most of these overlaps and to have this trilateral dialogues to see how we can further or enhance some of these cooperations with the countries you mentioned.
Basically, that is what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Minister. I'm going to turn to you. So do we have some hands here? Okay, I can see a couple of hands. So the mic here on the left side of the room. Then I want to also bring it to President Nasheed. And there's three questions, okay? So 2 hands in the back and 1 hand in the front. President Nasheed, let's start with you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the conversation. I'm from the Maldive Islands. Minister, you mentioned that France is Indian Ocean. My question is, when India and France goes together, we would like to see other Indian Ocean countries taken along.
Okay, can we, yeah, please, go ahead. The mic is there right next to you, yeah. Go ahead. Quick introduction and quick question.
Yes, my name is Mohammed Al-Luhuri. I'm the Director of Advanced Political Studies at Trend Research and Advisory in the United Arab Emirates. So thank you so much for the fruitful insights. I have a question for Mr. Jaishankar. So, guys, we are in the Middle East. You are in between India and Europe. And we read what happened today between Israel and Iran. So what role India can play when it comes to de-escalating tensions in this region? Because, you know, without us, we cannot talk about any initiatives in the future. So I want to take it in from a very positive perspective. What tool India have that can utilize to de-escalate tensions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there was a hand here, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Professor Anne-Marie Brady from New Zealand. Question for Minister Barrot. Can you discuss, please, the French position on China's efforts to take over Taiwan and the implications for Indo-Pacific security versus China's foreign interference activities in New Caledonia and French Polynesia, and particularly with the independence movement? Thanks.
Okay, so we have three questions: one on the Pacific Islands and the East, the South, the Taiwan question, and the Pacific Islands. We have a question on India's role in the current flare-up in the Middle East, and of course we have President Nasheed from Maldives. So, would you like to start?
Okay. First of all, let me say to President Nasheed that if anybody really helped to put small island developing states on the global map, it's you. And you put it so deeply. Actually, we have since kind of digested it, and it's become part of, I think, thinking not just of India, but of many other countries as well. Today, India has development, projects and programs in almost 80 countries of the world, 78 to be precise. The countries probably who feel the need most and whose interests in some way have to be supported, are the small island developing states. So it was interesting when I was in Brussels with Commissioner Sekela. We actually, who's in charge of international cooperation, we were actually discussing how EU and India can work together in third countries. And my urging was particularly let us look at the small island developing states. But your question is broader than that. It's not, just development assistance. It's really a larger well-being and, how do we protect them from debt? How do we give them alternatives so that they make good choices? How do we help with capacity so that they can evaluate good choices? I think there are some issues here which certainly India and France and India and EU will discuss. And if I could jump to the third question, actually India today has a growing interest in the Pacific Islands as well. That in many of the Pacific Islands, we already have projects. We have largely focused on health because that's a big concern there, to some degree on things like space applications or capacity building, solar. So this is an area, I think, of potential conversation and cooperation. On the issues which have happened overnight, what can India do? Look, we have, we are a country which has good relations both with Israel and Iran. We have this morning issued a statement, as indeed have many other countries, about what's going on. But I do eventually put it to you that in any situation, not just this one, ultimately it is very much for the parties involved to make up their minds. It's very it's unrealistic for someone outside to insert themselves or to offer to do something if they are not prepared for it. So the issue is really how their own dynamic is going to unfold, and whether at some point of time a country like India or somebody else for that matter can be of particular help.
Minister, you have the final words.
No, so on the two questions that pertain to the islands in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, let me advertise the United Nations Conference on Oceans that we hosted in Nice, not so far away, this week, and that has proven to be a huge success. More than 100,000 participants against 7,000 for the previous edition of this UN conference. And one of the reasons for this great success, and sorry if I'm moving a little bit away from the question, is because we decided to open it up to civil society and the greater public. And it's a lesson, I think, to be learned, which is that when you choose to open up rather than to restrict your conversations in diplomatic fora only, then you build successes and you build and you can raise the global awareness on issues. And I want to thank Tanya and Rodolphe for their support in precisely opening up this fantastic space that we call the whale to the greater public. And during this United Nations conference, on the side of it, if I may say, and within this space that was open to the greater public, we had an important summit on the islands and small islands dedicated to the challenges they're facing, which was an opportunity to give a new impulse to the necessity for all countries in the world to take this vulnerability into account, especially vulnerability with respect to the rising sea level. And France made important commitments in the way it's going to shift its development policy to take into account those vulnerabilities. And as far as security is concerned and foreign interference, as you probably have seen, we've demonstrated our willingness to be present to counter precisely the threats to the freedom of navigation, threats to our interests in the Indo-Pacific region, with, of course, President Macron spending more than 8 days in Indonesia, Vietnam and Singapore a few days ago, but also, and perhaps even more widely, the trip that our aircraft carrier did in the region with a very important joint military exercises with the Indian Navy, but that went as far as Japan to assert our presence that is respectful of the sovereignty of our partners, of sovereignty principles in general, but our presence to reaffirm commitment to international law and to the law of the sea.
Perfect. I think that's a fantastic